Good evening, welcome back to Heart and Hand Extra. This is your second pre-show of the week, and I am your host, Adam Thornton. We're making a bit of a habit of these happy extras. Cammy has done the last two after European away games, and we've lost both of them, which I think tells its own story. But anyway, we are here to talk about Rangers, who are now in the Europa League final after another 3-1 win at Ibrox, this time against RB Leipzig. Joining me to basically just cheer and scream for the next 45 minutes are, first of all, David Edgar.
I don't know how much screaming I'll be doing after last night. My voice is taking on Sean Dychean characteristics, but it was well worth it.
Do you know I tried to do just about half an hour ago? I tried to scream the John Lundstram song, and my voice broke at the end. I was about 14, and Linton running through saying, "What is going on in here?" I was like, "Sorry, just got a bit excited." We've also got Martin Ramsey.
Hi, Adam, David, James, listeners. Anyone slept yet?
No.
I
Tried.
slept for
Tried.
to be honest.
No, I eventually at like 4:30, I thought I've got to try and sleep. Went to bed 7 o'clock. I think I maybe got about 2 hours fitful sleep and then just gave it up as a bad lot and got up.
I think we're getting used to Thursday nights being
Europa League
like that,
nights.
but there's always that buzz, and it does take a bit of time to get down, especially if you're doing media and you don't get away from the stadium for whatever. But nah, last night never really happened, to be honest. But we wouldn't have it any other way.
Nope.
No. And we also have James Forrest. James, how are you?
We're all sounding suitably husky, which is going to be good, and hopefully that's something people can enjoy. I feel hungover, but didn't drink any drop of alcohol last night. I'm not quite sure how that's possible, but just the adrenaline and the excitement of one of the most memorable nights of, I think, most of our lives last night. That was just an incredible thing to experience.
Yeah, it takes quite a lot for me to be husky, to be honest. So I'm going to take it when I get it. But completely agree. Just absolutely drained of all energy. I think it was a very, very emotional night. David, I'm not even really sure what to say on this podcast. It doesn't really feel like we need to break the game down play by play, but of course
No.
we'll try our best to hit the main points in a little bit. But just your immediate reactions, please.
I was confident going in, and I think there was an air of confidence among the support, which I think is generated by the players. I was fortunate enough to be in Leipzig last week and doing press, and I think I mentioned this on Patreon that I was struck by how confident the players and the management were. They really did believe they were going to do it. Not complacent, not arrogant, and not bravado. Just this really centered, quiet confidence. Given everything that had gone on at Ibrox this week, given the emotional toll, I think there was always concerns that the players might get a little bit caught up in the maelstrom, but they didn't. They were focused. I think the image of this night for me will be Glenn Kamara kissing the armband with just this look of steely resolve on his face that we're doing this. Look, this shouldn't happen. I mean, it's easy to be over emotional, and and I'm probably going to be, and it's easy to say things that are maybe a little trite in this instance. But Red Bull have got I mean, they're backed by a conglomerate. They're backed by a multi-billion-dollar corporation. They have everything that you could possibly imagine on top of their TV money, and they're pretty much guaranteed either Champions League or Europa League group stages every year. And they were blown away last night by Rangers. And this is the thing about this run. The 2008 run was amazing, but it was edge of your seat of the pants stuff, defending for your lives and trying to nick something. This has not been that. We have beaten every team that we've come up against in this run. We have been better than them. We have outscored them all. There'll be no away goals and nothing like that. Rangers have just been better over 180 or 210 minutes in the case of Braga than some very, very decent outfits. And I think 2008, I sort of felt Adam getting there. When we got past Fiorentina, there was maybe a sense of, well, we're just happy to be there. I don't get that this time from fans or players. Last night was amazing, but I think there's a belief that we can and will go on and lift this, and it feels different to me in a very, very good way. But look, when I turned 30, I had given up hope of seeing my side in a European final. By the time I'm 45, I'll have seen us in 2. And here's a wee stat for you all. Since their takeover in 2008, Rangers have made twice as many European finals as Manchester City.
It's mental. Martyn, we spoke about how the players just seem to think quite casually, yeah, this is happening, just because, in that kind of superstitious way that players probably behave. I think I have, in some part of my brain, been pretty similar ever since Dortmund, but I would never allow myself to think it fully, and I would never say it out loud. But just the way things have gone, that there has been that feeling that we were at the very, very least going to get to the final. I know you're kind of thinking the same, probably, that the players feel it, but maybe not necessarily yourself. But how did that manifest itself pre-game for you? Because there were a lot of nerves flying about, but for me it was nerves about the occasion rather than the team and the game.
It's hard to make sense of the day yesterday. It was actually quite a horrible day until kick-off, and then it got worse.
John Lundstram, until the ref blew that one.
Yeah, this is the thing, isn't it? It's this, being a football fan or a football fan of, well, that's not true because it's all relative, right? You know, someone that supports a team in League Two and they get a playoff win at Wembley or whatever, that's incredible. So it is all relative. It's an exquisite torture being a football fan because you only get the good moments. Usually at the end when it's all done, you know the outcome and it's a good one. You've got to live through that incredible tension. And listen, there were moments last night that we had to weather a few storms. That 2 midfield at the start didn't really look like it was happening, did it, Adam? And they were quite comfortable. And obviously that maybe 15-20 minute spell they had right after the second half, and they were kind of pulling the strings, pulling us about a wee bit. And everything is just a living nightmare until you get the prize. This belief thing, it has come from Dortmund. I don't even know if it was Dortmund away because you can maybe just say it was just one of those nights. I think Dortmund at Ibrox, and we were going out at half time. Okay, what anyone says, we were, that's where that game was headed. And the manager, as we know, made big changes. The players bought into it and it was an incredible night. And then it's the draw, isn't it? And I think Red Star and Braga, just no gimmies for sure, but even I felt, these are doable. That night that Barcelona and Lyon went out, you're like, right, this really could happen. I'll be honest, I was, as you know, very disappointed with that goal last week. I would have been confident when 0-0. I fear for them with their pace on the break, but I thought Rangers, as I said, managed the game so well last night. They didn't go hell for leather. I think we talked about that in the pre-match show in the press room. I think they felt Braga were there for an absolute doing.
Yep.
But I think they knew that this was a different team and they were just going to have to be a bit patient, grab the goals when they could. We had that wee spell, 5-10 minutes in the first half, that's just so characteristic of these Ibrox knockout games where we score one goal, then another, then probably should have a third. And we just boxed well. And they stopped after their second goal, after their first goal to tie everything up. And then it was, who's going to deliver the knockout then? And it was us. And these players believe they had to find an answer last night. That was a sticky spell when Leipzig levelled the tie because they were in the ascendancy. And for the first time this season, get into between 70 and 80 minutes, we looked tired. And we found a way because this team do in this competition. Echo the thoughts of David on 08. We were like competition winners by the time we got to that final. Walter said something after Lisbon. I just hope we get to the final. And I think that was the prize really. Getting to a final seems so otherworldly. That was kind of enough. And I don't think that team had the belief really when it came down to it that night. I think this team do, absolutely. And look, I don't believe in fate, don't believe in destiny, it's all romantic nonsense, but players are superstitious creatures, and they will buy into whatever narrative they can cling to. And the 150 and the 50 years from Barcelona, and some of the emotional trials that they've had internally at the club this season, all feeds into that. And anything that I mean, whatever works really, but anything that makes them feel that we're on this course, and no one is deviating us from that, and that's how it feels at the minute.
I think there's a style thing as well, guys.
Totally.
That Rangers team, they knew what had got them there 2008, and it was scrap and it was hard work, and they'd found a way just to sort of clamber over these opponents. But with the exception of maybe Werder Bremen at home, we had to play a certain way, and it's actually quite telling that when people talk about that run, the only kind of memorable night they bring up is really Florence. As part of that run. Obviously, the final was very memorable, but there weren't these great nights really even at Ibrox. Bremen was the nearest. Well, in this run, we've already had Dortmund, Braga, and last night at home. And Red Star was pretty special as well, but it's gone fourth in the list because of how great the other three were. And I think that one of the reasons for the confidence and the deserved confidence is we don't need to go and hang, and hold on and rope a dope and hope against anybody. We can go out and play. Now, we'll still have to defend well, and we'll still have to be careful in possession. We were a wee bit loose at times in the first half last night that got us worrying, but they know they are capable of going and putting together passing moves and combinations and scoring goals. It's a different level of confidence because, with all due respect, I think that we are a far better team in terms of football ability now. In terms of attitude, that particular team had it domestically and in Europe that season. But this team in Europe has proven, a lot of them over 4 years, that they deserve to be in this competition. And it's somehow very fitting that this group, because I think there's a legitimate shout if they win it. In particular, but even if they don't, I think there's a legitimate shout for this 4 years to be our best concerted period of performance in
No
Europe.
danger.
Therefore,
No question.
You don't. Oh, right. Okay, I thought you were disagreeing.
Oh, no question at all. This has been. People have been talking about the Ibrox atmosphere, guys, and we've had some special nights, but we've had some desperate nights and some humiliating nights, some real flat nights with loads of empty seats because the club didn't get the prices right, and there was just this mismatch really when it came to Europe through the 90s and whatever. Domestic success came maybe a wee bit later than we talked about with Gerrard, but the European respectability was instant, and I think we just bought into that side of from 2018, and some of the teams that have come to Ibrox and left with very little has just increased this sense of event. Took it maybe a wee dip in the group stages this year. It was quite flat until Sparta really. But these last 4 games they're not isolated. They're not one. There's not a one-off season. This is perhaps the culmination. Hopefully not. Hopefully this is Rangers being in Europe post Christmas, post the clocks changing, just being a norm would be great. But this is part of a pattern that the squad and fans and club are just tuned in when it comes to Europe, and have been since 2018.
I wouldn't go as far as saying that after we beat Dortmund, to me that these 4 seasons are up there in terms of.
Oh yeah, I mean, I honestly can't. Well, certainly in my lifetime, and I suppose that's all I can judge. And especially the way European football is now, you don't win a tournament by winning four ties. That doesn't get you all that far these days. You need to play 8 games to be midway through a group stage, really. So I think that when you factor in the amount of games that they've had to play to do it, some of these guys will be among our record, damn near record holders for appearances within 4 years, because of the amount of European games they've played. But the other thing was, I remember in the early 2000s when Celtic did much better in Europe than we did. They couldn't win away. Remember, famously, 33 ties, but they could get through group because they fancied themselves against anyone at home, and they bought into the mythology of Parkhead, and their fans bought into the mythology of it. So when they went, the noise was amazing.
And
And
opposition bought into it.
the opposition bought into it, and we didn't have that because we'd been scarred by the 90s. We'd been so badly scarred that we didn't have it. As Martin says, you would go to matches in the atmosphere. I go back to the Fiorentina semi, the atmosphere was flat at the home leg because there was just this fear of, oh, is this going to happen? Ibrox is different now. Ibrox is special and has been these 4 years. Yanis Hadji's immortal quote that it's just different, and it is. And I mean, last night again, when I was in Leipzig last week, was speaking to their officials. They were perfectly pleasant guys, and I think we all remarked to each other last week as we were coming home that they seemed awfully happy. Delighted with a 1-0. Really, really delighted. And
As did Braga.
yeah, and I said Braga, and I sort of said to them, I was like, you really had to put us away tonight because you don't know what you're going into next week. And they were like, oh, well, we've been to Dortmund and we've been to Munich. And I said, it's different. You don't understand. Well, their manager and their chairman both come out and said, aye, it's all right saying, what, one of the quotes was, it's okay saying you know what to expect, but you don't until you experience it here. And these can be self-fulfilling prophecies. And in the way that we didn't have it because of the 90s, Celtic have lost it. They don't feel that way. They're expecting bad things to happen to them in Europe because bad things always happen to them in Europe. Whereas with us, we go into it against anybody thinking, hey, you never know. And that feeds on itself. And then last night, I think, was the absolute epitome of it. When you've got a team as coldly professional as Red Bull Leipzig, because they're not an emotional club, right? They are the sporting division of a corporation. Everyone there is a professional. They're doing it because they earn big money to be there. Nobody loves Red Bull Leipzig, including their fans. And for them to come to Ibrox and go, holy shit, what is going on here? You can't manufacture that. You can't buy that, as they're proven. You can have all the money in the world, but you can't buy that.
I'm sorry, not sorry, just because people have been asking me on Twitter. We'll do the greatest games thing again in 2024. I think you're talking 10, 15 new entries. It's just in that spell of the last 3 years. Because there's so many memories in one-off fixtures being made. It's been incredible time. I know.
Games.
Easy.
There's an interesting stat. I know we're talking about comparisons in terms of 2008 to now, but Craig Vickers on Twitter has actually just posted something saying last night was already the 5th time under Van Bronckhorst that Rangers have won by a 2-goal margin in Europe. Only happened 6 times under Gerrard across 3 and a bit seasons. That's quite interesting. James, myself, David and Martin were talking pre-match on the Patreon site, and David asked me what I thought of the team, and my response was maybe a little bit flippant, but I said I didn't really care. I don't think it really matters who plays just now. When you boil it down, last night we started that game with John Lundstram at centre-half, who's converted, Calvin Bassey at centre-half, who's converted. So basically we played one centre-half against Red Bull Leipzig. We had Jack and Kamara in the midfield, who are good players. Kamara isn't having a good season. He came on to a fantastic game last night. But when you look at it in isolation, there was nearly riots when Jack and Kamara played in central midfield against Livingston 18 months ago. That shouldn't really work. And then we've got Joe Aribo as centre forward and Scott Wright, who, no offence to them, didn't have the best game last night. It's a makeshift team that we put out there, James, but it just didn't really seem to matter. It was about the team collective and the spirit that the team have got rather than the individuals. Obviously, we're also missing Roof, Morelos, Hadji, Helander, someone else that's escaped my mind. They're all missing big players.
And Aribo had to go off.
And Aribo had to go off.
Time.
These big players that have went to the well for us time and time again, but it just didn't matter. There's just this collective belief, James.
There is, because we trust that the manager knows what he's doing. We know, like, he's been very, and I know you and I have talked about this, Adam, at games before. It really is. It's less about there being a specific shape and then putting in the players to suit that. It's about saying these are strongest 11 players we've got available. This is a system that's going to work. And again, it was something a bit different in this game. We've had a lot of experience in recent years of the shape is the same no matter what, we will play the same way. But we matched what Leipzig shaped up to in that game last night. We did exactly the same thing. We had Lundstram playing more on the right-hand side with Goldson in the centre. That was a very deliberate choice and ploy because Goldson is your only natural centre-backs that makes sense for him to be in that position. Tavernier and Barisic were playing more as kind of wide midfielders at points rather than over in Leipzig. They were definitely playing in the defence. It was a flat back five. Aribo would come slightly deeper because he's more naturally a midfielder. But again, it just works to suit those individual players. It's, you know, you're right that it doesn't overly matter as much in terms of, all right, this is the 11, because it's about the shape, it's about the actual instructions that's coming from the bench for the specific game plan. And I think Van Bronckhorst, certainly before tonight and especially now, he's earned the right for us to believe that we know what he's doing in these sorts of games. And it worked beautifully. We started the game really, really strongly. We started as you would expect it to. I think the goal comes at a really, really good time for us because we don't have that sense of, oh, it's half an hour, still not got that goal, getting that slight bit of fear that you're naturally going to get when you hit that milestone. And the second goal, I mean, a lot of last night is a blur for me in a lot of ways, but it doesn't feel like it's not as much longer before we do get that second. And from there, we just looked. We didn't look like we were up against a team that was £100 million players and stuff like that. We looked like we matched that perfectly fine, and the atmosphere was incredible to go along with it as well. But yeah, so much of this is on Gio and the coaching staff for the way that we now feel like a proper team in these type of environments and these sorts of games, and they can step up to that challenge.
Martin, I think we said pre-match we'd be able to tell within the first 10 minutes or so whether it was going to be similar to the last few home European League Ibrox. Probably fair to say that wasn't the case. We weren't terrific in that spell. What I would say now in the cold light of day is when we started with that 3-4-3, we matched up to Leipzig. Very, very bold and very brave. The concern for me would have been Jack and Kamara up against their midfield too, and I think that probably bore out a bit in the early stages. But when you think about that, makeshift defence is a bit of a wrong term there, but it's kind of, they're not in their natural positions. To go 3-on-3, man for man, with that Red Bull front three was very brave, and I guess looking back as a calculated gamble. How do you think that kind of went? It got better throughout the game, but how do you think it went?
Oh, it was hugely bold. To basically go man for man across the pitch. But that's what we've kind of come to expect from Van Bronckhorst in Europe, certainly. And you're better placed than anyone else around to comment on this, but I'm not sure we get that sense of change, sense of flexibility, sense of dynamism, sense of bravery with Gerrard in Europe or domestically at all. I mean, it's just we've seen so many variations even within a game as we did last night, because he has players like Lundstram and Bassey, I guess, Adam, who can be flexible, who can give him other options and are happy just kind of doing it. They understand their job. But yeah, we set out that statement, which meant that we weren't going to flood them, that's characterised the last three home games, hasn't it? Have we scored in the first 10 minutes in every game before last night? Something like that. I mean, it's been a very early start.
I think it was like 12 minutes against Dortmund, yeah.
But it's been an early start anyway, with that intent and the old championship manager gung-ho thing. So that meant we didn't do that, which was fine by me, because
they had too much pace.
I couldn't have done it. So we need to play our way into the game, see out that spell. I think they were maybe in some kind of false sense of security, and And then we just picked our moments, Adam, I think, to really go. As I said, that middle period of the first half, scored 2 goals in 5 minutes, should have been 3 in, 10, whenever the Aribo chance fell. And it's not I was going to use the word blitzkrieg there, but you know what I mean. It's not just that incessantly until you fall down. It was targeted last night. Very grown up, very mature. Just a Rangers team in Europe that I've been wanting to see since I was a teenager, and not really seen until the last few years. That's the reality of it. Just very aware, very present in the game, and able to adapt. And I typified by I keep going back to those two, Lundstram and Bassey, because they've been the story of this knockout run, I think.
I'd add Tav in there. And
I mean, Tav, yeah, of course. But we kind of...
Yeah, we knew what Tav and Morelos...
He doesn't do... The two of them... Yeah. Tav and Morelos have basically just done what they've done for the last few years in Europe. But it's the ability to be different. I think has been characterised by those. Obviously, everyone knows Lundstram, but Bassey last night was just imperious at times. And you go back to that game in Prague, I don't think I've seen a worse Rangers performance in my life from an individual. And to go from that to this, that must be the biggest turnaround in a season I've ever seen. Everyone talks about Haley. That's bollocks. I mean, Haley's still scoring 10, 15 goals before that end of that season. That was an awful performance in Prague. I mean, it was embarrassing.
Yeah, I'd like to quote one of our friends, Ewan, who said that not only did Calvin Bassey not look like a centre back, he looked like somebody who'd never seen a centre back. And I just think the boy is incredibly teachable. We've mentioned this before on here. He is a really good kid. He's a really nice, respectful, kind person. He's just a good guy, Calvin Bassey. And he listens and he does what his coaches tell him, and he looks after himself and he works hard. And you pointed something out to us last night at the game, Martin, where you went, he's telling Goldson where to be.
Yeah, that's in contrast to a couple of weeks ago when Lundstram is eviscerating him at Hampden for bothering to check
quite rightly,
and he's sorry John, and that fits the Bassey mold because he is such a lovely boy, and he absolutely but there's a hint of subservience about that. And then last night, screaming at Goldson to stay back, I'm going to move here, you move there, and you're like, well, this boy just changes almost within a game. I mean, it's an incredible rate of maturity that we've seen this season. I struggle to think of a Rangers player that's developed in a good way that quickly.
I guess it's from, when you think about it, from zero expectations, if we're being kind of cross-border deal that's coming in. We already had Bassey there. You're thinking he's not really going to get much game time. It could have been akin to Matt Polster coming in, for example, when he actually came in. So for it to be low expectations, I always feel like maybe someone like Haley, who turns it around, coming in for money, international, all that sort of stuff. It's more of a surprise that they are not as good as you want them to be, and then when they turn it around to just get to the level that you want, then that's one thing. But coming in with nothing and playing the way that Bassey's played, James, the one thing about Bassey is he can't head the ball. I think we all know that. There was even one last night he played head to himself, right?
Two or three at the one, 2 or 3 goals near the end.
Yeah.
Oh, dear me.
The one thing I will say about that, and I've had so many messages, particularly after Parkhead, for some reason, so many people getting in touch. Why is he never in the box? He can't head the ball. Like, you can see that at the back. What's the point of him sending him up for a corner? I get the confusion aspect of it. It might do good, but the other part of it is that recovery pace that he's got. Just leave him at the back, and no one's going to get past him one-on-one. Even if they do, he'll catch them. James, that ability that he's got on the ball, off the ball, is one thing. The heading is a bit of a low point. However, he's still very, very young. If he's going to be a centre half, timing in the air is one of the later things I think you get in terms of anticipation and experience. So it's not, like we've said, he is a learner. It's not that he's never going to be heading the ball. It's just right now, it's maybe just not a priority that he's being taught that. All the other aspects that he's got are arguably more important. But what's your take on, I guess, his performance last night and throughout the knockouts?
I think he's been a really, really important player for us at the back because of that versatility when we've needed to have someone come in at centre back when because we've had bad luck really with that injuries in terms of Helander and Balogun. And many other teams would have a real issue there in terms of, well, who do you partner Connor Goldson with? But Calvin Bassey's ability to kind of sort of learn on the job a wee bit it's been crucial. It's been vital. You look at the conversations that people have about, I think he's a left back. I still think he's a left back. Yeah, for the stuff that you were talking about there in terms of that, from a defensive side, the recovery pace, but going forward, look how much of a better crosser he is now from at the start of the season. There was times in games sort of earlier this campaign, if you remember, we were almost like willing him to get a good cross in because we wanted him to get better at that. Now you've no worries about him being able to put in a good delivery if he's in that position. The same thing can happen in terms of aerial ability, but other sides of it in terms of standing tackles and whatnot. He's already in really good place with that. For someone who's 22, for someone who's got a really exciting career ahead of him, and when we look back on this campaign, we'll talk about him as being one of the key guys for the fact he's been an ever present in the back line. The fact that he has made himself a first team player this season. We've seen that progression over that. And he can still progress even more. He can still get better as well. It will be interesting over the next few seasons when we see him, where do we play him? I think there are fans who certainly would have been in the camp of, he's definitely a left back. He's definitely going to play there, that won't be so sure. I always thought that, you play him on the left-hand side of a back three, that's probably, his actually is probably his best position, because you almost, if you play the right way, you're going to get the best of both worlds in that sense. But whatever system, whatever shape we need to play, as Martyn said, to have not only him, but other players as well who can adapt to that to help suit our game plan that's going to give us the best chance of winning. Those sorts of players, they are invaluable to a team.
Definitely. David's, it just had to be John Lundstram, didn't it, really?
It did. Don't tell me, by the way, that, don't tell me. Martyn says there's no such thing as fate and destiny. Well, yeah, we'll agree to disagree, because it was going to be him. And I'll tell you something, I was glad it fell to him rather than maybe some of our more erratic finishers, shall we say. You'll remember the incident when Scott Arfield does heroically, unbelievably well to fashion a thing where all he needs to do is square the ball, and he tries this outside of the boot thing and passes it back to the goalkeeper nowhere near his target. And we do have a couple of players. As much as I love Ryan Kent, I wouldn't have him as a great finisher, but I knew he'd score. As soon as I saw that number 4, I knew he would do it. His turnaround has been, astonishing, because it's not that, he'd had some good form earlier this season. We saw that, and nobody was desperate for him to go in January, but we wouldn't have been sad if he'd left. And there is a difference, but still, I suppose it comes to the same in the end. It's not just that he's improved. It's not just that he's showing us, why we signed him. It's that he's playing at a level in about 6 different positions, sometimes within matches, and he's playing with an authority and taking on a leadership role that is genuinely inviting comparisons with some of our actual greats. And he's so calm and unruffled. And I think that Martyn and I have spoken over the years about that guy in the team that you look to. And sometimes it's a special player that, right, you can do something special. We all know the famous Alan McLaren to Gaza story. You're supposed to be the talented one, go and do something. And it can be that guy, absolutely. And I think they look at Kent or Morelos or Tav for that. But Lundstram is just I will be all right. If this turns into a battle, I know we can win it because he's here, right? I know he'll be there if I need to, have a pass to him on or whatever. But watching John Lundstram at the end singing the John Lundstram song and all his teammates serenading him, and the Copeland was sitting, the whole stadium was, but he was in front of the Copeland and they're dancing away, was just magnificent. I mean, I'm actually getting, the kind of goosebump feeling just talking about it. He went through a lot and he never complained. He never moaned. We never heard any stuff from his agent about, John's not getting enough game time or any of that crap. And there were times I remember where he was doing press conferences when he hadn't been playing, and he just kept saying, "I'm working hard. I'll keep my head down." It was a lot to take in when I first arrived here, but I think I'm learning. Jesus, you've passed the exam. And again, you just feel when he's on the park safe. He brings a level, and if he does that to me in the stand, if he does that to Martyn in the stand, who's not easily impressed and has a tendency for his optimism to occasionally take a short holiday, then imagine what it's like to be one of his teammates. He's extraordinary, and when he put that away, and the thing was, when they scored, I don't think I'm alone, because it was coming, right? They just did the brilliant save from Alan McGregor just before, but they were dominating. We couldn't get out. When we got the ball, we gave it straight back. Martyn mentioned we looked tired, and it reminded me disconcertingly of that Benfica game at Ibrox, when it was, people say, our game management. It wasn't game management. It was Benfica were brilliant, as I think they've subsequently proved, and they ran us ragged, and eventually we just mentally tired and made mistakes that they took advantage of. And I saw the terribly alarming parallels with that game, but I didn't necessarily see where a goal was coming from. And for me, I was thinking, right, get to full time, don't concede. Let's get to full time, get to extra time. Manager can do a reset, and he's very good at those, and we'll see where we go from there. But of course, somebody was going to pop up and be the hero. And again, these are all things that make you believe that we can win it, because they do this. They do find ways. The goal that Braga scored against us was a shattering disappointment, but they go out and they get the win and they get over the line. And it's a magnificent result, incidentally. We're so caught up in what it's led to for us and the special night. We've look at our results against these sides. 3-0 against Red Star Belgrade, 4-2 obviously, and even 2 each against Borussia Dortmund, 3-1 against Red Bull Leipzig, 3-1 against Braga. These are fabulous results. I mean, really top results. We're scoring goals and we're making things happen. And it was just, when that ball hit the net, and the three of us were together last night, and we sort of leapt up, and there was this, delight, joy, but amazement, and just, that's the kind of thing that happens to us in Europe. And I know that's a 90s boy in me. It doesn't have Glenn Kamara's goal is the type of goal we concede in Europe, where it's just this perfect, unstoppable, beautifully placed strike that's almost cruel in its perfection. And there we are doing it. We don't look as though we're in the mood to stop.
We're not in Kansas anymore. It was fitting, Adam, that Lundstram gets that goal, because he's been so immense. And I know his goal ultimately wasn't the one that won it, but also fitting that Kamara had his moment last night, given, I guess, how the Europa League ended for him last season. And it's just another little thread in this particular tapestry that I thought was quite apt.
They weren't even the best 2 Rangers goals last night. I'm not sure what you're talking about, but okay. So
top goal scorer in the Europa League.
Right back though, can't defend, just scores penalties. Never a captain. That's a good point actually, James. The free kick that will come in for the goal. If you watch it back, you see Goldson and Balogun, I think that aren't planning to come up. I think this was right in this period where Red Bull kind of had us a little bit. They're not planning to come up for it, and Tavernier is pushing them forward to get them in the box. He overhits the cross deliberately, I think, probably. This one, I think we'll all agree. He overhits the cross, it goes over Goldson's head, and it gets to Kent, who brings it in. But I want to have a word for the manager, because we have been speaking about Lundstram and Bassey's flexibility, but you see it again where the manager makes a change, and it's Balogun coming on, Ryan Jack going off, who I think had a nice pack on his ankle. Hopefully he's okay, but that then means that Lundstram can move into the middle of the park, and I think that really helped us out. At that base level, he's probably not going to be in the box at that point, or maybe not still in the box. He'll be trying to get back possibly if he's at centre half. So the fact that he's in the box prowling about to get that winner is great. But then also later on, that run that typifies him, where he just runs through 2 or 3 Leipzig players and finds himself pretty much one-on-one, and he squares it to Sakala, who's offside. But just that dominance that he's got in the box to score the goal, but just that physicality that we've been needing in the middle of the park, and the energy to still be going at that stage, given everything that has happened over the last month or so, was just unbelievable from him.
Because you look at who's up front at that point, and it's not, you don't really have guys that are going to offer you any kind of physical threat. Really, it's Kent. That's not really his game. Sakala is actually better in the air than what you might think, but again, that's not really his primary role. So you do need to have someone that's got a bit of strength further up to just offer that when you're wanting to maybe try and put in those sorts of attacks. I was worried. I'm sitting with my dad, and we were both kind of thinking, have we almost gone a bit too defensive too soon, in terms of just with the type of changes that they were. And I think especially when they got their goal, we were really worried at that point that we had just made that decision a bit early. Obviously, I know the reason to taking Jack off was probably because he's taken a knock, which is absolutely fair enough, but it was something that's back in your mind. But looking back on it now, just being able to have Lundstram playing up in that area, and not just being a guy that you don't just turn him into a target. It's not like you put Goldson up there, because Lundstram can do so much more when the ball's at his feet. He can play a great pass, and he's unlucky with that ball. If we'd got a goal for that, would have been called back for offside. He's very unlucky with that though, because it's a really, really well hit ball. But yeah, again, it comes back to what I was saying about the in-game management from, and I'm sure a lot of it comes, a lot of credit for the way that we play in these kind of games as well. You've got to give that to Dave Voss too, as well as Gio kind of making the decisions, because these guys will be, they'll know in terms of different shapes at that moment to kind of go with, depending on what's available.
Tactically, I think
Not
Van
for long.
Bronckhorst is, really superb, and he's demonstrated it throughout this Europa League run. Not only with his ideas, his ability to change them within a game, and his marked almost anti-reluctance to do so. He doesn't say, no, we play this way, and it will just be about the players executing the game plan, which incidentally is a, Adam, you'll know better than me, but it is a school of management. It's that Klopp, Bielsa thing that, no, the way we play is correct. If it's not working, it's the players are not executing it correctly. And that is legitimate, incidentally. I tend to think that might work if you've got top grade players, but I think if you've got, maybe not quite that, you need to have that tactical flexibility. But he will change it up. He will make things happen. And I think we've seen quite a lot of, as we've mentioned here, resets during matches. Half time on Sunday was a good example of it. He's very, very good at just picking up little things that are happening in the game, making slight alterations that sort of turn them your way. And that again, the players are clearly buying into it now. That he does that, so they kind of throw themselves into it wholeheartedly. Whereas if there's not trust there for a manager at any club, then obviously when they're asking him to do stuff, they kind of look at it skeptically, and it doesn't translate. He is absolutely terrific at just saying, we need to do this, you need to be here, we'll change shape for 10 minutes. Doesn't mean we might not change back or change to something different later. But the players, you need the players who can do that, and the guys who are so important in that, we've mentioned Bassey, Lundstram, but everybody else goes and does their shift, whatever they need to do. Kamara was a great example last night. He played that role in the first half, and I thought he was magnificent. Second half, he had a different role, but he did it, and they do it without complaint, and they can do it without needing a settling in period, and that at this level is enormous, and again, something we've rarely had.
Another thing as well is just, you think about it, that when we're going through our kind of more difficult spell under Gio earlier in the season, people were saying, maybe he needs the summer, he needs to bring in his own players, guys that will kind of suit him better. But he's still working with a squad that's in the main being built by someone else, but he's developed these players into the type of players that he needs them to be. That in itself is a really important skill for a manager to have, and he's done that in a relatively short space of time to get us to the level we're at now. That's also rather remarkable, I think.
It's a difficult one to really put a label on, because you're kind of going from an ideologue to a generalist, I guess. And when everyone wants to define things, don't they? They want to say this is how Van Bronckhorst plays and this is how it is different to Gerrard. And I've been saying for a while that there isn't really an overarching. Obviously, there's always a philosophy, there's always a game model, there's always a plan, but there isn't that constraint there with him. He could play a three at the back in a random game and you wouldn't think anything of it. It's about the execution. It's about Bassey and Lundstram stepping in so that it is kind of not a three in the back when you're in possession. It's completely different. Similarly, last night he went three up top. He's done one, he's done two, he's done one behind one. It is just changing all the time, and I think when things are going well, all of these changes are so subtle. You mentioned in the post-match press conference about Bassey in the game against Hibs in the League Cup semi-final. We've seen how effective he was at pressing, that kind of active pressing and coming out any midfield to try and dominate the forwards. We've seen how well he did that against Rogic at Hampden and again last night in one of the Braga games as well. So just all these little tweaks in game that maybe don't all form a philosophy together, but it's much more at the lower level. He's not put a foot wrong at all. You can't argue with the results absolutely in the European stage. Martyn, it's a bit of a cliche, but I think we always need to do it. Just a bit of context on this European run. There's that graphic flying about. The Rangers starting lineup cost £13 million. When you consider that Ryan Kent is over 50% of that, you've got 10 players that cost £6 million that are now favourites. I think I've seen earlier on are now favourites for Europa League final. You look at Red Bull, you look at Frankfurt, they think nothing of spending 20-25 million on a player if it got them where they need to go. It is not a cobbled together side. It doesn't feel cobbled together, maybe in the way that 2008 did. They don't play like it's cobbled together, but the facts are the facts. For the amount of money that we spent, for our turnover, etc., we are massively overachieving here.
We are. We it's felt like a continual overachievement, if that isn't an oxymoron, because every single season of this 4-year spell, Adam, we've kind of surpassed where we really should be for our spend and for our situation, and obviously the club, its infrastructure, having a rebuild really only since 2015. I mean, that's not that long ago. So I think only last year did we think, right, we're a Europa League team, a very comfortable group stage, kind of consistent player, and that's fine. And now in the fucking final, they just don't stop with kind of breaking these barriers in this particular arena. So that again, that comes from Gerrard's first season. We had no business being in the group stage with 4 qualifiers. We were the only second team to do that or something like that. No business at all. And it just, I think that set something that, you know what, that there are no barriers here, only in your own mind. And I think it's just been this continual growth season upon season. And that's kind of led us where we are. Leipzig, I mean, right, okay, I don't want to go down the whole, you and Murray get the balance sheet out. Sometimes it goes very wrong. Teams can spend a lot of money and it just is very bad. But they won a Champions League semi-final 2 years ago.
They're a very good side. And Kunku is as good a young striker as you'll get in Europe, not called Haaland, right? I mean, this is a top side. They spend their money carefully and pretty well.
Yeah.
You know, as you say, that this is not like Manchester United, reckless spending on rubbish that doesn't fit together. That's not who they are. It's a hell of an achievement. It shouldn't have been possible.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the logic, and again, maybe, you can hang on and get your 0-0s or get your away goals when it was there, or hold on for penalties. We didn't do that. We beat them 3-2. We're through. We scored more goals than they did, and we went through.
It shouldn't be possible, and maybe logic doesn't come into it in some respects, but David, we can't finish up, and we will finish up in a few minutes. We can't finish up without talking about the fans and the atmosphere, which we mentioned there. The Leipzig manager Tedesco said basically that spooked us a little bit. He wouldn't go as far as saying that the players were spooked, but he said I didn't really appreciate what that was what that was going to be like. We were in there very early, obviously, in the press, and it was palpable from about 7:30 onwards. And I thought throughout the entire game, my first season ticket was 1994. I didn't get anything earlier than that in terms of European stages. Parma's always been the benchmark for me. I think some of the games this knockout round have came quite close, but that eclipsed it, and I don't think it was even close. That was absolutely unforgettable in terms of how the fans drove the team through that.
Context?
The size of the match, but that again, I think there can be an expectation sometimes that it's just going to do, know, and people can turn up and expect it. And I think that did happen against Fiorentina, albeit that was a first leg. But I think that people sort of turned up expecting this amazing atmosphere, and it didn't translate. I am murder for old Rangers things in the past when I were a lad were better, back when I had hair and everyone wore Ben Sherman shirts and we were on our way to 9 in a row. So I can be murder for that. I was at Kiev, I was at Parma. They were both phenomenal. Kiev, to me, of course, has that allure of I was a little boy and I saw it through a little boy's eyes. Parma was just, magnificent, and you can talk about the quality side that they had, and it's a legit thing. Last night was the best. The atmosphere, the emotion, obviously with Jimmy Bell, and the crowd and the players honouring him, and just this steely determination of being in it together. Somebody on Twitter, tags on Twitter, had a really great line where he said, that's the kind of thing you get at music concerts, where you just feel at one when the band and the crowd and everyone's on the same page and you're singing the same songs and they mean a lot to you and everyone's together and there's a bond. That happened last night. And again, you can hand out as many wee plastic flags as you want. Right?
You can't contrive this.
You can't contrive it. It happens or it doesn't. And it's, as I say, I'm a tendency to, in any of these debates, to go, recency bias, or things were better in my day. No, last night was the best, and people can disagree with me, but I was at all three. Last night was the best.
And the band analogy is brilliant, but the Europa League's the album. Like it's a collection of all these moments building to that one thing. It was always going to be that way unless Leipzig come out and scored 2 goals in the first 20 minutes and flattened everything. It always had the potential, because unlike all these other famous nights, and they were brilliant. I'd add Marseille into that as well. Leeds was tense. Actually, Leeds was not a great atmosphere, but some special nights. But not for 50 years, literally, none of them. Ibrox has not seen a game with as much riding on it, because second legs are different. And it is the final stage before you go off to a major final. So the context always meant that it had the potential to be that. We talked about it all week, really, since we were still in it. The 1-0 defeat kind of left us and still live in the tie. Yesterday was dreadful. I mean, I just left the house at 5 o'clock. I think I just need to go. Because it was oppressive. that tension,
long day.
So you get this release, and obviously the match turning out the way it did. The ingredients were there, but even I was amazed just by how special it was. And again, in Europe, players, fans, club seem to just be on the same wavelength, the same frequency, and have been for a few years. And this is just that combination of it. It's the greatest night in the history of that stadium.
James, last word on that for you before we finish up. It was a stressful day leading up to it, but when we got there, when we started singing, it just felt. It wasn't a conscious thing. It wasn't forced. There was no defiance about it. It was just, as David and Martin have described, just a thing that happened, and both the stadium and the fans and the team were all in one. And I'm not a big fate and destiny person, the same as Martin, but I think when you have something like that happening, it's very powerful for our team, and it must be very daunting for an opposition team, regardless of their calibre.
I've got messages after the game from people in Germany watching the game, and they're talking about the atmosphere, saying we don't get that in this country. We don't get it to that level, and you're talking about a country where one of their big things is kind of fan culture and how it's such great atmospheres and it's great to be a football fan in Germany, but that was special last night. That's in years to come when I'm your boy's age, a while yet to go before I get to that probably, but I'll be saying the same thing about that's the standard. It's Leipzig, and it's a night that all of us will remember, and if we're lucky enough to be in the stadium for it. Just 90 minutes of, I don't think I've sweat so much at a game before. Just I was drenched at the end of it because the pressure and the release of that, and to release it in such a good way as well, by celebrating the goals when we did, and to celebrate at the end. And I was in utter bits, and I'm sure there was other people that would have been the same as well. Just achieving that and everything coming together. So Martin's right. It's the greatest night that stadium has witnessed, and we're going into the final that, given how we've done up to this point and who we've played, it's very winnable. It's far more winnable than what 2008 was. So it could be something that we look back on as being part of something absolutely massive, the biggest thing to have happened in modern day Scottish football history. And I'm a big believer in that. It can be something that can happen, and that'll be another reason why we'll remember last night as being just beautiful in a footballing sense.
Absolutely. David, I think we'll finish there. Not the most polished of pods, probably, quite a lot of rambling and emotion, but as Jimmy Bell said in that video that got played pre-match, not really bothered what happens as long as we win. And we absolutely did. And we've got to the end of the pod without any crying, not very much cheering or yelling. I think our voices are all intact, so we'll take that as a win, and we'll move on to next week. But thank you very much for joining me.
Yeah, we'll have plenty of plenty of time. We've got under 2 weeks, but we'll have plenty of coverage of the build-up over on Heart and Hand on Patreon. So people go there. You'll hear more from us. But yeah, I think we're all just, this is a feeling, man. This is a feeling. And some people don't like football. Shun these poor, half-dead, soulless creatures.
Absolutely, Martin. Thank you.
Pleasure, Adam. Big game on Sunday. 5 games.
5 games from the treble. That's right. Yep. Okay, James. Thank you very much.
Do we have a game on Sunday? Gosh. Yes, thank you, Adam. I'm thinking my way back to bed for a wee bit, to be honest.
Yeah, well, you better buckle up because we're out tonight, so a couple of hours sleep and we'll be good to go. Okay, thank you all for listening. As David said, if you would like to hear more from us, you can at www.patreon.com/Heart and Hand, up to 4 shows a day for as little as £1.50 a month. David will be back on Monday with the flagship, and we'll be kicking off the build-up to Seville over the next couple of weeks. Hope you have a lovely weekend, and we'll speak to you then. Thank you.